Own the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller. Coming up on this episode,
I think there is a lot of pride in the Midwest, a lot of hard work and determination. We have a rich, rich history.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. I'm Kelly Phillips.
And I'm Bob Phillips. Our journey to all 50 states continues this week with a trip to the plains of Illinois. Now, when somebody mentions Illinois these days, you probably jump immediately to Chicago because, well, that's just what comes to mind first.
But there was a time when Illinois and the surrounding states represented some of the best farming known to Americans, with rich, fertile soil and what seemed like endless and available land.
And that led to one of the simplest yet most important inventions in our history as a nation.
We arrived at an historical homestead located almost in the middle of DeKalb, Illinois, in the midst of a snowstorm. Fact is, we had been driving in that snow almost since we left Texas. 3 or 4 days ago? By now, we're kind of getting used to it.
Still, we were looking forward to warming up a bit inside this important landmark where an invention that changed the world was made. But instead of taking shelter from the storm inside, our host and guide, Jessie LaRue, wanted to show us her barn. And what a barn it was.
This is really the barbed wire artifact, in my opinion. This is the site where he initially invents and manufactures barbed wire. It's an unusual building. It's a brick barn, which we don't see a lot here in the Midwest, but so sturdy because of that. The second floor here, there's 7 little windows. Those are where the horse stalls would have been, and they were nose windows. So the horses could actually take their muzzle, pop out, get fresh air, come back in. Cistern was in there, a lot of different things. A very nice barn. There is a tack room. Obviously, that's where the horse tack hung, but it's been written down that that was actually his office. This is the world's first barbed wire factory.
Barbed wire, devil's rope, whatever you want to call it. This is where it all started, by a man named Joseph Glidden. And like a lot of world-changing inventions, its original purpose had little to do with its later important uses.
Joseph Glidden was just trying to get Mrs. Glidden to get off his back about the cow.
So he is 61 years old when he invents his barbed wire. He's basically got a pesky cow here on the property. Very well documented for a family cow named Brindle. She's the family's milk cow, and there's stories about she's able to knock down the wooden fence and get into Mrs. Lucinda Glidden's garden.
He was trying to solve the problem, and he changed the world?
You could say that. So that's something that's kind of going on, and she's getting after her husband. What are we going to do about this cow? And I'll figure out some things. This poor woman is probably driving him nuts, and vice versa. She notices her big, beautiful hairpins start to go missing. And getting after their 20-year-old daughter, are you taking them? No, Mom, I'm not. And the story as it's documented is one night at dinner, he actually pulls one out of his shirt pocket, and he's messing with it.
One thing about American ingenuity, it's anywhere, it's everywhere, and it often occurs in unexpected moments, in the least expected ways. And that's the case with Joseph Glidden and barbed wire.
But this piece of American ingenuity really did change the world we live in. And that's why this town and our tour guide, Jessie LaRue, have worked so hard to honor him by keeping the Glidden homestead open to the public so this story could be told and never forgotten.
So he had seen other fencing locally before. We see wooden rail fencing with nails coming out of it. Well, we don't have lumber, forests, things like that here. Along with Isaac Elwood and Jacob Pace, they're at this mechanical fair here in town. They see this wood with nails coming out of it, and they say, why don't we just get rid of the wood and use wire? And that's when these men go on their own way, start to tinker to the barbed wire we know today.
And he tinkered right here.
Correct. So it actually starts in the basement here at our homestead.
In the building we're in right now.
Correct. Over the winter, he's down in the kitchen. He actually disassembles his wife's coffee grinder. He could drop little pieces of metal into it, twist, and make barbs. To me, he was just a farmer who had a problem to fix.
And that problem, as it turns out, was a lot of people's problems, not just with their own milk cow trampling the garden. You see, before the sodbusters showed up, some folks were trying to run cattle on the open range that had once belonged to native people.
And those herds of cattle could not only do damage to the garden, but could take out an entire field of a farmer's crops. Well, there had to be a truce, a way to separate the fields from the pastures. And Joseph Glidden found the answer. How important was the invention of barbed wire to settling our country?
It was absolutely monumental, in my opinion. It was cheap. It was easy to put up. It was easy to repair. You know, right here in DeKalb, we're by the railroad tracks. Joseph also allowed for the railroad to come through here on his property. We could just throw it on the railroad track, ship it out. It was so accessible. It was just the most simple invention, but it really changed things.
You plant a crop and a rancher's cows trample your crop. I mean,
Right.
they had to be a truce of some sort, right?
Correct. And the different types of fencing at the time were very terrible. We had wood fencing, which I mentioned here in the Midwest. There's not a lot of lumber. It's expensive, the upkeep. Stone fencing, cast shadows, different types of bushes and things. You wait for these things to grow in. Barbed wire, you can just the efficiency, I think, is what made it so huge.
To be clear, Joseph Glidden's barbed wire was not the only barbed wire on the market, but it was the first and most widely used even today.
One of those other inventors was a man named Jacob Haish, who was also from right here in DeKalb. He and Joseph Glidden were competitors, but in the end, they worked together to make their community a better place. And that's a part of this story that Jesse can't stress enough.
They bring the college here. They do a lot of good, the library, the hospital. So there is that competition, but also we're going to do what's best for the community that brought us up, essentially.
You're very passionate about this place and this story in particular. Why is that?
Obviously, I do have some personal connections, but I love this idea of here's a guy, I've got a problem, I'm gonna solve it. Oh, I became rich, I'm gonna help other people. I feel like he kind of fell into it. Obviously, he was a brilliant man, but he just kind of fell into it and he did good things with it. He reinvested, he took care of people, and how can you not be proud of that and kind of aspire to be more like Uncle Joe?
He's a hero to you.
A little bit, yes. So I take this job very seriously, preserving his home and the buildings where he walked and took care of business. I mean, and we are located in a very busy modern corridor. So when people come onto the property or they step into the barn, we're taking them back to the 1870s. And I think that is a very rare thing today, is to go back and go, things were a lot harder. I'm really grateful for how things are today. People had to work a lot harder and figure things out. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from the past.
And back outside in the cold and the snow, we take one more peek at Joseph Glidden's barn that Jesse loves so much.
I consider this the world's first barbed wire factory because this is where they do that for 6 months before they have to build an actual building solely for the purpose of making barbed wire. So this, you think innovation, creativity, manufacturing in the United States, this is one of the first starts.
Kelly, there is so much more to this story, like the fact that our tour guide is actually related to Joseph Glidden's competitor, Jacob Haish.
And how there were other members of the Glidden family that also made contributions in the world we live in, and how the town of DeKalb was affected by all of this.
We'll pick up that conversation with Jesse Haish LaRue.
My name is Jesse Haish LaRue. So I born and raised in Sycamore, just a couple minutes from here. I'm 8th generation resident of this county. born and bred. I love the agriculture story. I love the roots that I have here. Went to Kishwaukee College, our local community college, studied journalism. So writing is my background, my passion, and history was always something I loved because I am related to Jacob Haish, who was a barbed wire baron, but always something that, in high school, college, you don't have time to pursue those things. As soon as I was done with college, I kind of leaned into that, started a blog about him because he doesn't have a museum. We're going to share his stories, tell his perspective on things. And when this role opened up about almost 4 years ago now, I was approached because of that work I was doing. I don't have a museum background. I don't have that particular set of skills that was, you'd think you need, but I was approached for it and let's try it. History, accessible and interesting. And, to blog about a 150-year-old story, but, and having a Facebook presence for it and making it interesting and for a new audience, that's what this place needed, was kind of a cheerleader. I was happy to fill that role. So we're here 4 years later, and I still love what I do. I am so excited to come here every day and talk barbed wire and why this story matters. And
Okay, what's interesting, though, is Haish was a competitor of Glidden,
yes,
where we are.
yes,
So you're working at the Glidden homestead,
yes.
but you were related to Glidden's competitor.
I get questions about that a lot, especially from some of the older historians in town. Like, I don't know how people would feel about that. I think being as competitive as they were, they made each other better at their industries. You can't have a McDonald's without a Burger King. You can't have, there's that competition that drives you to do better and be better. And before this, Jacob Haish was the carpenter in town, the most well-known, and he builds this house for Joseph Glidden about a dozen years before that rivalry.
He built Joseph Glidden's house.
Yes. And then a dozen years later, there's barbed wire rivalries. But they do work together even after the rivalry. So there was Native Americans on this land originally. The government acquires this property. And then there is a Russell Huntley who purchases a lot of this property. That's Joseph Glidden's cousin. So Joseph is actually living on the East Coast, riding back and forth with his cousin. Joseph wants to be a farmer. And his cousin is pretty much telling him, if you want to farm, Northern Illinois is the place to do it. We have the greatest soil in the world, right? This is where you should be doing this. So he does come out here and acquire 600 acres in the 1840s for about $1.25 an acre. And he is literally taming the prairie here and setting it up. So we're just a little remnant of that area. But he was, kind of a pioneer in that way of coming out here and preparing this area. We can move out west and find a little bit more land and elbow room and stake our claim. And especially if you love farming and you have a knack for it, you can be very prosperous with that. This is kind of the outskirts, the unknown, but if you were willing to kind of rise above and take a chance, be a little risky, you could do okay.
What was life like for those people?
This would have been prairie. So Joseph actually sets up shop and home about 40 miles from here while he's actually taming the prairie here in DeKalb. So this isn't even ready yet. We can't even imagine the amount of work that would.
There was no town here yet.
Correct. It's very early threshing machines, things like that, and that's where Joseph's story comes into it, is that if you want something done on the old farm, you're probably going to have to come up with it yourself. You're going to have to engineer it. You're going to have to just solve your own problem. I don't think he set out to be a millionaire or to change the world. It was just, I'm on my homestead and this needs to be resolved. I'm going to take some stuff from around here and deal with it.
Was he an engineer or anything, or just a self-reliant guy on
Very self-reliant. He had been a school teacher out east. So smart guy. Absolutely. And a great farmer, but put those things together and that's pretty much an engineer, right?
So this was a controversial thing now when they first came out with barbed wire, because you've got all these ranchers who are grazing their cattle on public lands. They think that their cattle ought to be able to go anywhere. All of a sudden, the farmers start putting up barbed wire. Was that kind of a fly in the ointment kind of thing? Or?
Absolutely. There are definitely different perspectives on barbed wire and whether it's right or wrong. So, here, and for instance, on the homestead, I'm keeping the cow out or I'm keeping the cow in. Problem solved. But, so moving out west, are we working to fence things in or fence them out? There is that question. The cowboy, is his role relevant anymore if there's no open range? Native Americans called it the devil's rope. Not very appreciative of this. And we do see it even expand into being used in World War I, which is past Joseph's lifetime. He is gone by then. But, in tandem with the machine gun. That changes warfare. We see it in concentration camps. So with any invention, you can have one hopeful outcome and see it being used one way, but it can kind of take on a life of its own. And we see that with lots of things. So it's really up to the person's interpretation of how they use it. The house was built in 1861, but he'd actually started in a log cabin about 20 years earlier and farmed this area. So becomes a very prosperous farmer and is able to build this beautiful brick home within 20 years. So this is not an inventor millionaire's home. This is a nice gentleman farmer's home. He's living here with his wife and daughter, Elva. And after that, his nephew actually takes over the home in the early 1900s after he passes. So, and then his descendants live here till 1998. So we have Gliddens here for about 150 years. So to say what happened on this property, a lot of different generations, and everyone kind of left their mark on this place.
But he was actually living here and working here and farming here in the land of Lincoln during the time of Lincoln.
We have a beautiful brick barn here on the property. That's where the invention happens and the manufacturing. But he also bred Percheron horses, nice big work horses. So that's part of the story. Obviously, Brindle, the milk cow, things like that. But we see a lot of different animals over here as well. Now, Joseph didn't have diaries. I don't have any writings to go back on, unfortunately, but we've been able to kind of piece things together in family stories over the years.
And who is the lady behind you in this picture?
This is Annie Glidden. And I love to talk about Annie. She is one of Joseph's nieces. So Joseph's brother actually dies quite young, pretty tragically. So Joseph is able to step in and kind of care for the sister-in-law and nieces and nephews. And something he's able to do is send these kids to college in the early 1900s. And Annie chooses to go to Cornell, study agriculture. Kind of unusual for a young woman at the time, but comes back and really farms a lot of this area by herself. So locally here in DeKalb, she's a larger-than-life figure. I mean, in many ways, there's a mural downtown DeKalb that depicts her. You know, she raised money for the first books for our public library, just a very beloved character.
Why are you so enthralled with history?
I could say in elementary school, I had a teacher that, said, this year we're going to do Civil War, we're going to do World War I, we're going to do World War II. Sorry, girls, I know you're not going to be interested. And that lit a switch in me. That's probably says something about my personality, but I just dove in. And I already had a little bit of interest in the barbed wire story because of my connection to a relative of it. And my dad took us, to the local museums, and we tried to piece together what we could. But that was something I could connect to. And I'm a big believer that, history and how it's taught is, all right, here's your 3 big wars, and then this one thing happened. And if you don't connect with any of that, too bad.
Dates and dead people.
Local history is a great way to kind of get your feet wet. And this happened in my backyard, and I can connect to that story and have that hometown pride. And we actually tour all of the local 2nd grade students here, and to be able to tell them, here's this thing that you drive by all the time, and this important piece of history, American history, happened here. We actually use a motto, history happened here, with the kids, so that they kind of feel that gravity of where I'm walking, something important happened. And we kind of hope that they learned that Joseph, he was just an ordinary guy who wanted to improve something, and he did. And we try to encourage them that they can be innovators too. They can invent something. They can be just as impactful as he would. And our high school mascot is the Barbs. So that's kind of how we wrap it, is when you go to high school, you're going to be a barb.
Did Glidden accomplish other things besides just, farming and, inventing barbed wire?
Many, many things. He was first publisher of our local paper. He was mayor, sheriff, many different things. He was so well beloved. People called him Uncle Joe in the newspaper. Uncle Joe Glidden is planting his corn. Uncle Joe Glidden is doing this. And when he passed away, the front page of the paper said, the grand old man of DeKalb County has died. So this is not just a man who invented barbed wire. This is a man who became wealthy, stayed here, and reinvested it. He became part of the community. He served his community. So in the 1890s, they were looking to build rural teachers' colleges. So we're going to put these schools out here. Somebody's got to teach the rural kids. So there was originally a teachers' college, and they were looking at a few different locations, but DeKalb was up for one here in Illinois. And Glidden says, I'll donate 64 acres of my prime farmland for you to put the college on. Elwood and Hayes step up with checks and prominence, and that brings that here in 1895. So, and Northern Illinois University is still bustling today.
I'm kind of surprised this place wasn't named Gliddenville or something.
It was nicknamed the Barb City, so we do have that nod to it. But and a lot of Glidden roads, Annie Glidden, things like that. But here at the museum every day, we're still trying to tell people how important this story is. We have new people in town or people that have been here a long time that just need that reminder that a lot of what we have here is because of this invention, like in some way. So he actually builds a nice hotel downtown DeKalb, which he had brought the train here earlier. So now we need a nice hotel. And he pretty much retires there with his wife. Kind of joke that it was a nice assisted living. And he continues to, be a part of the community in this beautiful hotel. But we have stories of well into his 80s. He's in the basement of that hotel, still tinkering, still doing, I think he's still receiving patents until his late 80s on different things. Aisha's birthday, his 200th birthday will be in 2026. So we are looking to kind of share his story a little bit. He was a German immigrant, came here at about 9 years old and kind of built up his own way. So kind of sharing his story of barbed wire and philanthropy and what he chose to do with his earnings.
Was this going back then, a story of Stephen Jobs with Apple Computer and Bill Gates with the PC kind of thing? Because they were both working on inventing barbed wire, but clearly the Glidden barbed wire was the one that kind of got adopted.
Absolutely.
Why was that? Do we know?
So these two actually take it all the way to the Supreme Court over who did it first, who did it better. They do duke it out in that way. And in the patent paperwork, Glidden actually says, so there's 2 strands of barbed wire. Glidden says that the second strand is used to keep the barb from sliding around, where others had said, was to keep it stronger or whatever the reason. And that's what stands up in the Supreme Court is that I need that barb to stay in place. If I have a big steer running into this and they all slide to the end, it's totally useless. So just that phrasing was pivotal, and that's kind of why he becomes adopted as the father of barbed wire. He's got an excellent marketer and his business partner, Elwood. It's just kind of a dream team in that way, and being able to carry that. And although the copyright is expired, if you go out west, you're pretty much going to see the Glidden winner still today. You go into Farm and Fleet or something, it's going to be a Glidden type of wire, essentially.
Eventually, did it get to where this stuff was being manufactured other than here? There were other companies making it and selling it, paying a royalty then to Glidden, or?
Yes, essentially, yes. We do see different factories, even in Illinois. What's interesting is, once Glidden starts to make some money with this, other people realize, well, I can invent a barbed wire too, and if I adjust it just slightly, I can have my own patent. So that's why we see about 600 different versions around that time. And as these companies start to consolidate in the later years, that's when royalties come in and a lot of legalese. That's probably over my head, but Glidden's is kind of that gold standard.
And it was the most widely used.
Do you think about Mr. Glidden while you're here working?
I do. I think, and working in a historic house museum, there is that duty to represent the people that lived in this home before. This is a museum now, but people lived here for generations, raised their families, had dinners here, told stories. And I think we have a duty to respect those stories and share them in a respectful way. And this house is still standing for a reason, and it's because it's got a good story to share. So I'm happy to be just one vessel for that. And it's funny, when I started this job, people were like, well, you're not going to tell Haitia's story anymore then. You're going to forget about him. And there's not a day that goes by where somebody doesn't walk in and, hey, did you know this thing? Or I came across this, or it's all connected. So, just to learn more about your town or the city's history, there's just ample opportunity for that.
You like connecting the dots, don't you?
Absolutely.
This because of this, because of that.
Right, and it's all connected.
Every time I see something that's very modern day or something that works or something that doesn't, I have this thing where I wonder, what would our forefathers think if they could see this? What if I could bring George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin or somebody back to see today? What would Glidden think if he could walk in the door now, see what you're doing here, see what the town that he helped build has become? What do you think this guy would think?
That's an amazing question. I think there would be some initial shock over how much it has grown. There was a lot of busyness, and this very busy Lincoln Highway was a dirt road when he was here, so that would be a little shock to the system. But I hope that he could walk right into that front door of that house and be like, this is pretty much the same. We joke that all the generations have come through here and left bits and pieces of furniture. We're kind of a hodgepodge of generations, but he could still walk into a room and this is where I did this. I'm especially proud. We've put a lot of focus into restoring the barn. Both of these buildings are on the National Register, but in the last year we put a lot of focus into
making that a usable space again. To me, that's a huge part of our story. Our goal is to have that in the 1870s era. So you could walk in to when this was essentially a barbed wire factory for him. So I'd love to know, would he walk in and, oh yeah, this is about how I left it? Because that's the goal in preservation. But I hope that he would be proud that we are kind of touting his good wins, the good things he did for the community, and that Uncle Jonas.
What would you ask him if you could?
I would say, are we telling the story you want us to tell? And is there anything we're leaving out? And why didn't you keep diaries that I can read and learn more?
Well, yeah, why didn't you write all this down?
Right, exactly. Oh, I think I would have a million questions. But I guess I would just want to know, is this the story that he wants us to tell? And how does he feel about the work we're doing?
When you lock the door and leave here at the end of the day and go home, think back on what you've done, do you get a good feeling about this work you're doing?
Absolutely. It's not easy work. Taking care of old buildings, it's difficult, it's expensive. Museums, there's people that like history, there's people that like local history. It's a very niche thing. So to find our people, find your tribe, as they say, it's tough work, but we have incredible people that support us locally across the country. We have an incredible community. So to know we have that support, even when the work is tough, that's enough to keep you going.
Tell us more about Annie Glidden and her importance separate from him.
The word that's used to describe her a lot is nonconformist. And I think that's because of the farming and just, she didn't marry.
She was a woman.
Yes.
Farming on her own.
Things. Absolutely.
Back in the 1800s.
Yes, early 1900s.
And we're talking about farming her own plot of land.
Right. All by herself.
Out here on the edge of wilderness.
We have some documents about local corn growing competitions, and she's competing against 8-9 men and coming in second place. She wasn't just doing this for fun. She was doing it very well. She gets together with local women. She starts a library whist club to play the card game whist. Depending on the story, they either had membership dues or they were gambling. But that money was used to buy the first books for our DeKalb Public Library. So this is just another way of, and really we see that in a lot of the Gliddens, is that philanthropy and giving back. And the last Glidden that lived in this house, Jessie Glidden, she's the one that was pivotal in making sure the house and the barn get on the National Register, setting up the 501c3, the nonprofit in the 90s. And she had that vision for this needs to be a story that is continued. So they all had very visionary think.
So Annie Glidden, it seems like, was a very progressive woman for her time.
I would say so.
Where did that come from? Do we know?
I think they all had their thing and they just went full force with it. I think part of that is, you have an uncle who's successful. That's great, but you also want to forge your own path. And I think Annie figured it out.
And she did it well.
When you're talking about her, I mean, I can't not think about something like Little House on the Prairie, that whole genre of the woman, the strong woman.
Yes.
Who's living her life the way she wants to live it, which was pretty rare in those days. We're talking about 150 plus years ago.
Right. And I can't imagine it was always easy, but, she stuck through with it and it worked out for her and she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty and she was successful because of it.
And she's still a role model today then.
Absolutely.
You've got that huge picture of her behind you there.
Yes. And she's on a mural here in downtown, has been since the 90s. Being a major road here in town, a lot of the kids grow up kind of knowing it's not Glidden Road, it's Annie Glidden Road. It's nice to have a woman in the mix too.
I would imagine that she has got to be a kind of a role model for little girls around here.
Yes. A lot of the kids knew her because they live off Annie Glidden Road. I do genuinely believe in the Glidden homestead and the story and the things that happened here. This is American innovation and spirit, creativity. It is a standing monument to what you can build with a little bit of ingenuity. And it happened here.
And by weaving a local perspective into the past, Jessie has turned history into her true calling. We are learning so much on the USA 250 tour, and we hope you are too. Thanks again for listening to this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, part of the USA 250 tour. Now, you don't want to miss a single story, so the best thing to do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube page. And don't forget, you can listen wherever you get your podcast. Best thing to do, download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.